Item 7, study session. 7A, receive presentation on the scope of work for a comprehensive fiscal sustainability project.
City Manager.
All right. Good afternoon, Council, Mayor, and citizens at home. Javon Grogan, City Manager. I will be giving a presentation tonight on fiscal sustainability, and in particular, fiscal sustainability project. So the objectives tonight of our presentation is to discuss the need for a comprehensive approach to addressing the city's fiscal sustainability, outline the preliminary scope of work and timeline for the project, discuss project resources and leadership, and then really to obtain feedback for council. We're not asking for any specific direction tonight, but kind of in summary, tonight's conversation is centered not on the specific strategies that we may employ to address our fiscal sustainability, but really on the overall process and methodology that we'll undertake to really wrap our arms around the problem, define solutions, and then implement them. So our agenda for tonight, we're going to do a quick overview of the general fund budget, our current FY 18-19 budget, talk about some of our known needs and challenges, talk about our reserves, and then we'll go into the project. Project goals, we'll give an overview of the preliminary scope of work, a high-level timeline, and then have time for council discussion and feedback. So just a real high-level overview of the city's current FY 18-19 budget. So we operate on a July to June fiscal year. So revenues for the general fund, which is the account that most of the city's general purpose revenues are deposited in and to use to fund basic operations, are $46.3 million. Expenditures total $47.9 million. That amounts to a deficit of just under 1.7 million, so 1.6 million. That was funded in this year's budget using fund balance. But one of the things that we all know is that $1.7 million deficit is not the true extent of our fiscal challenges. And so we wanted to talk about a few of those. So some of the known general fund challenges that we have are our infrastructure upgrades. I think most of our residents are aware that we have a number of community facilities in our roads that need upgrading, and we wanted to highlight just a few. So one of the key facilities is our fire station, both the administration building and that houses our administration and Fire Station 51, but also Fire Station 52. And the current estimated replacement cost of that facility is 10 to 12 million. We'll talk a little bit about the good news, but the good news is that we've set aside part of that money, but half of that balance is currently unfunded. Our roads, the PCI, which is the Pavement Condition Index, is currently at a 62. At our current funding level, we do not have the resources to increase the overall condition of our roads. And so it requires roughly $2 million a year to keep the overall quality of our roads from deteriorating. We have been able to budget or plan for in the next few years $1 million. And with SB1, we're projected to get another $750,000. So that puts us just under the $2 million, but really close to the $2 million that we need just to keep the quality of our roads from deteriorating further. Really to get our roads where we would like them to be, which is at an overall 80% pavement condition index, that really requires an additional $6 to $8 million annually that we would need to spend on our roadways. And $8 million would get us to 80%, our projections in 10 years. $8 million a year will get us to 80 in 5 years. Spending $6 million will get us there in 10 years. And so we ran the model both ways. Our stormwater system. One of the challenges with our stormwater system is that we do not have a dedicated revenue stream for that. We know that we have $25 million in Priority 1 and Priority 2 projects, an amount that we do not have the resources to fund. Street light poles, we currently have about 2,100 street light poles throughout the city. There was a 2015 condition assessment that noted that 680 of our street light poles need to be replaced at a projected cost of $10 million. Now, we did fund in this current year's budget approximately $319,000 to replace 36 poles, but it is a significant infrastructure challenge that we do not have the resources to meet. In addition, library expansion and upgrade, $5 million in curb ramp deferred maintenance, and a number of things that are subterranean in our parks, irrigation controllers and replacements. So we also have general fund challenges when we look towards, frankly, which is the greatest cost for our organization. Because we're an organization that really provides services with people, our largest cost are employee costs, and we have rising pension costs. So CalPERS has given the city projections, and the current projection is by the year 24-25, the city share, not the employee share, their cost is increasing too, but just the city share is projected to increase by $5.6 million. $1.5 million of that increase will be realized in the next year's budget. So when we have budget conversations coming up in the next 6 months, we will be looking for ways to fund that additional $1.5 million. That level of increase in our pension costs really begins to crowd out some of the normal increases you see in your revenues. And so we know we have upcoming labor negotiations that will be happening, and we also have a rising medical benefit cost. So in 2019, we received our rates a few months ago for 2019. The cost went up by 5%, so a little bit over $300,000. Now the good news is that we had the money in the budget for that, but we are projecting a continual increase in those costs. Other general fund challenges that we know we have is facility maintenance. We need additional resources to maintain our facilities to meet community expectations. And so what that is while we have some capital improvement projects, we also have some regular facility maintenance needs. So we need additional resources in our annual operating budget to fund some preventative maintenance, so some of our projects or challenges don't deteriorate to the point that they become a more expensive capital project. Corp yard upgrades, we have a number of ADA compliance issues. But we also may want to talk about making investments in personnel. One of the ways that we can address our fiscal sustainability is through economic development. But we currently do not have a single person who's solely dedicated to economic development working for the city. Urban forestry management and wildfire prevention is a significant need that we need more resources to address, and technology upgrades. So we didn't want to go in too much detail, but we did want to provide a flavor of some of the challenges. But there is good news. So the good news is that our local economy continues to show signs of growth. We will have a new recreation and aquatic center funded by the San Bruno Community Foundation with $50 million that came from PG&E. And San Bruno has healthy general fund reserves. And so the city has been a really good steward of the people's money. We currently have $11 million in our general fund reserve. We have a disaster reserve of $3 million, an equipment reserve of $5 million, and that's really for your heavy equipment and vehicles, a fund balance in the general fund of $2 million, and a CIP reserve of $7 million. A caveat with the CIP reserve, with the allocations in the current budget, a little bit over $2 million, and the allocations to the Fire Station 52, that pretty much depletes that $7 million. And so we do not have significant or frankly any significant reserves for our capital facilities once we take into account the $6 million that was set aside for Fire Station 52, and again, that only funds half of the estimated cost. But on our other reserves, the good news is that we're right about where we should be, but we have significant infrastructure challenges. So a few takeaways from our fiscal condition is, as you heard from the finance director when we had the recent first quarter summary, is our revenues and expenditures for the current budget year are coming in normal. There are no major issues, but our fiscal condition is stable. It's stable because we have healthy reserves, but it's not sustainable because we have costs that will come due in the near future and infrastructure costs that we need to address. And we know that while that $1.7 million deficit, or 3.5% of our general fund, is not insurmountable, we have that failing infrastructure, those rising pension costs, and frankly, the need for additional resources in our annual budget. And so the high-level summary today of our fiscal condition is there's no need for alarm, but now is the time to really wrap our arms around the problem, start to develop strategies, and implement solutions. And so one of the ways that staff would like to propose to council that we do that and truly wrap our arms around a very multi-pronged, multifaceted effort is to initiate and launch a comprehensive fiscal sustainability project, really with three goals. To undertake an effort to truly understand the magnitude of our fiscal challenge, to then articulate our fiscal challenge to you as our policymakers, but also to our employees and to the community at large. And then three, to develop and most importantly, implement strategies. And so I'll briefly go through each of those three components or prongs of the project. So the first is understanding our fiscal challenge. And the primary task here is to develop a comprehensive understanding of the fiscal pressures and constraints on the city's general fund, both today and in the foreseeable future. And really what we have knowns, but we also have unknowns. And so we want to undertake a project to put a lot of those knowns together, but then also study some of the unknowns. And so kind of a high-level scope of work is, one, develop a 10-year financial forecast, something that a lot of municipal agencies do, a lot of corporations do, is to develop a long-range forecast to show you where you're headed so you have visibility towards the problem and can begin to address it. The inputs of that will, of course, be general fund revenues, our pension costs, all of our basic operating costs. But one of the things we have mentioned here with the new Aquatic and Rec Center, the business plan. Staff is currently working on a business plan for the new Aquatic and Recreation Center. And should there be any added cost for that new facility, we want to project that into the plan. And so this 10-year financial forecast is something that staff intends to develop for the city this year. Or in 2019, and so when we're having our budget discussions, we will be looking at a long-range plan. Currently, the city does a one-year forecast with a look towards the second year, and we really want to provide that overview, and myself and the finance director will be working on that. The next major input into understanding our challenge is really taking an in-depth look at all of our infrastructure with replacement costs and prioritization. And so that's all of our public facilities, be they parks, our playgrounds, our ball fields, the library, and our parking lots. And some of this may very well require studies to look at some of the subterranean things that we know are failing, but we really don't have a good information on what's underneath the surface, what is the condition, so we can really get that dollar figure of what we really need to be fiscally sustainable and put it together. Roadways, other infrastructure, and IT, something that's oftentimes left off, but IT investments can be significant, and we would like to incorporate those in our understanding. The third component is to conduct a health assessment of some of our enterprise funds. And really what this is it's a threat assessment. Which of our enterprise funds are healthy? Which of our enterprise funds are not healthy and may become a threat on the general fund? One of those that we certainly know is our stormwater. With the new regional board requirements and the capacity projects that we know we need to undertake in our stormwater system, because we do not have a dedicated resource for our stormwater system, it is a threat to the general fund, and we want to put that input in this assessment. Cable TV we will be talking about tonight, and there's a presentation on that. We're examining our fleet management and replacement, and then also assess our fixtures, furniture, and equipment. One of the things that we currently do not have a reserve for is your typical FF&E, tables, chairs, things that are individually not of a capitalized value of, let's say, $50,000 or more, but individually when it's time to replace them can be a significant cost to the city. So then the component 2 is articulating our fiscal challenge. And the primary task here is to communicate and establish a dialogue about the city's fiscal condition, our financial outlook and challenges with council, employees, and the broader community. We propose a few high-level scopes of work here. One is to enhance our ongoing citywide communication, be that on social media, be that in presentations that staff would give to various community groups or citywide publications. And so the focus report, a report from City Hall, the last one was done in July 2018. So looking to produce one of those in the first quarter of 2019. Citizen surveys, employee newsletters, focus groups, and enhance our communication and our process around budgeting. So having community budget presentations and council workshops on the budget where we can dive down deeply into some of the issues. The next task is frankly to develop and implement some of the strategies. So it's to identify specific financial and operational strategies to achieve fiscal sustainability and create an action plan with identified resources to support implementation efforts. As someone that used to work in consulting, what I would always tell cities is you do the study, but if you don't fund the implementation and really have an action plan, it's often a document that collects dust. And so what we really want to do is we want to take that next step and we want to ingrain that next step in this project, which is to have that implementation action plan be a milestone out of the project with identified resources, because a number of the strategies that will likely be developed will take some time. We may not see the dividends for 1 or 2 years, but it's a strategy worth achieving. So components of the scope of work for this could be identifying and prioritizing our strategies, a broad range of strategies. Revenue enhancement measures. Revenue measures does not just mean taxes. It could mean a dedicated focus on economic development. It could mean looking at some of our fees and making sure that we are truly charging our true cost to recover fees. It could be looking at our cost allocation plan, and when we have grants and we're ensure that we're charging the full cost of our overhead so we recover more of our costs. Expenditure controls and reductions, organizational efficiencies, or cost shifts, potentially shifting things from the general fund to other funds. And one case of that could be stormwater, potentially looking at a dedicated revenue stream for stormwater and shifting that burden from the general fund to a dedicated stream. But as a part of this project, we want to truly have a in-depth stakeholder engagement process. So with our employees, with our labor groups, with our residents and businesses. So that's focus groups, that's going out talking, that's surveys, and then a significant process with the city council for your policy level deliberations. And so bring council a palette of strategies to choose from, knowing that the magnitude of our problem frankly cannot be all revenues. It's likely going to have to be a myriad of solutions, but providing council with a set of strategies by which you can choose from. So we also wanted to note projects that have already been started. So we would not begin this project from ground zero. A number of things are currently underway, and a number of things have already been started. So we provide a few here just to highlight, and I'll highlight these really quickly. So under the component of the project of understanding our fiscal challenge, we have an ADA transition plan. It was done. We know how much. We know that we have a $5 million deficit for our curb ramps. We know we have a $7 million deficit for our sidewalks. We are currently doing the cable enterprise business assessment that you'll hear after this presentation. We periodically do actuarial studies for our pension costs and our other post-employment benefits. We know what it will take to reach our targeted PCI pavement condition at 80, so anywhere from $6 to $8 million a year. Stormwater master plan. So there was a 2015 stormwater master plan. So we know the capacity projects that we need to undertake. But one of the things that was not included in that plan was a actual video of our stormwater system like we do our sewer system, a closed circuit TV to actually see in the pipes that are underground where the problems are. And so we may want to look at funding that effort as a part of this. Street light pole replacement program. And staff is currently receiving quotes for a wildfire prevention assessment. So we know we don't have enough resources to address all of our urban forestry maintenance, but what we want to do is to prioritize those so when we do have the resources, we can apply our dollars where they're most efficient. Under articulating our challenge, we have budget presentations. We're currently looking at enhancing the city's presence on Nextdoor, and we're developing that budget calendar for our 1920 budget. Under developing and implementing strategies, council allocated or set aside money for Fire Station 52 and allocated $1 million of that in this current year budget to begin the design on Fire Station 52. We will be bringing development impact fees, potentially revenue enhancement measures to council on December 11th. We are currently examining our fleet and looking at our fleet policy. Council has had initial discussions in a subcommittee to look at revenue options, and one of those that came out of that is a short-term rental ordinance, and so we're working on bringing that back to council in 2019. So project resources. So project leadership would be myself as city manager and our finance director, but this is an effort that will involve nearly every member of the city's management team, our supervisors, and we want to, as I said before, engage all employees. There will be team leads, there will be strategy leads, there will be people leading various components of this project, and it will really be a all-hands effort. Project funding, we have budgeted funds, so the city personnel will not be an additional cost. In the current budget, we have routine studies that we do that will be inputs into our fiscal condition assessment. But this is a very large project, and to really do this in the time that we need to do it and to do it at the professional level that we need to do it, we may need additional resources. And so that's consultant support, that's support to help us with the focus groups, meeting facilitation, and polling services should we look at a revenue measure. And so we know that there will be additional resources needed, but we are proposing this to you because we think that it is a comprehensive project worth taking all the individual pieces that we're doing and really putting them into one effort with a goal, with timeline, with deliverables. And so that's the next slide. We wanted to highlight the timeline. So the kickoff of this project in January, February of 2019, and really run 24 months, so through December 2020. An important effort with a lot of different steps, and on the slide above you, I won't go through all of these, but we would have the expenditure control conversation around our budget time. We will have the 10-year forecast. We'll have our initial revenue strategies in the second quarter of 2019. We'll have a conversation of, is there a ballot measure for November 2019? You can see up above that question mark is also there. Is there a ballot measure for November 2020? But we're also planning in the schedule to have short-term quick win strategies that we implement to have that threat assessment of the general fund looking at all of our other enterprises and take this project through implementing of short-term, mid-term, and long-term strategies throughout from essentially January of 2019 to December of 2020. And so proposed next steps would be following council feedback and direction, we would create a detailed project timeline and finalize the key components, finalize the project resources and funding, have the kickoff meeting and roll out, and then initiate our budget process, which will happen in the middle of this, but somewhat connected. And so that is the presentation tonight. Open for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you for the report. Questions, comments? First, I guess, questions from council on the report. Questions? Michael?
No questions.
No questions. Anybody have questions on the report and the data? Okay, any comments or statements? Now, Michael?
Sounds like a great plan.
Michael? Anybody?
Yeah, sure.
Mr. Medina?
So thank you.
I guess my main point is until we really identify the problem, then we're not going to be able to get to a solution. And I think this is a great start that's long overdue. In the presentation, you mentioned having some public input, and so I'm a little curious on how you think that is going to come about. It's like some ad hoc committees or just public meetings, or how is that going to play out?
Sure, various ways. So under stakeholder engagement, there is information that we would communicate to the public. We would very likely create a reader-friendly budget. So distill the couple 100-page budget down to 3-4 really good pages that we can share with the community and go on a roadshow. So go to community events and have those focus groups in the community. We may also look at having a community-wide survey about priorities and city services. We will certainly, on the staff side, have focus groups where we invite our employees in and have surveys for strategy ideas. And so oftentimes when these projects are undertaken, there are public surveys, oftentimes electronic now, on the website where your citizens can provide input on some of the strategies that they see, or prioritize the services that are most valued to them.
My next question. Sorry. Economic Development Director. I think we in the last budget kind of talked about that a little bit, and that's something that we're going to wait till June to implement, or how do you see bringing somebody on board to help with the development, economic development?
Sure. I think to preview something that staff is looking at, the actual title of our Community Development Director, the classification title is Community and Economic Development Director. And so one of the things that we're looking at is restoring that economic focus in that department. But my gut would not be an economic development director. My goal would be an economic development manager. So a step below the director, someone that can really be out there and be a resource and an ombudsman to our businesses, that can focus on business attraction and business retention. That position is currently not funded in the budget. That classification is currently not created. And so we would need to develop that proposal, bring it to council, and undertake that. And in our process, that may be a several-month effort. I'll tell you one of the things that the conversations that the new Community Development Director and I have had is that we are taking on that mantle from both of our chairs. And so certainly we want a focus on economic development in this city, both business attraction and business retention, small and large businesses. But I do agree. I think that is a focus that we need, is a dedicated person focused on economic development.
Last question would be for a ballot initiative for 2019. That's, what, 9 months or a year away, right? We just finished an election, so planning to get that together, it's going to have to happen pretty soon, and we should probably start talking about that. So I'm just kind of concerned about the scheduling on that and how we're going to get there. You know, we're approaching 2019 almost in a month, right? So I'm just...
A lot of work would have to be done if a revenue measure is pursued on the November 19 ballot. But I think through the project and early on, starting in January, February, we should have a lot of conversations about that and really look into the strategy behind revenue measures in its entirety.
Other questions or comments from council?
Yeah.
Laura?
Yes, thank you. Javon, excellent presentation. and I think it's an excellent overview of sort of where we're at, where we need to go. It's a good basic foundation. I think the comment that you mentioned in your presentation, it's no need to be alarmed, but it's time to strategize and implement solutions. And I think, I'm excited. San Bruno has spent a number of years really focused on things that were out of our control. And for the first time, I think we really do need to assess what's going on. What are the things we don't know about? Let's get the big picture. Let's understand what our challenges are in entirety, not just what we know, and develop a plan. So I look forward to what's to come, and I thank you.
Irene?
Yes, I'd like to echo what Laura said, and also I'm excited about the public input part. I've talked to many people who say, well, why don't you, or I pay my taxes, how come that's not enough, and all those things. I think we need to do a lot of education about what your taxes do and do not pay for, and what the real, as you said in your presentation, what the real cost of something is, and how generally such a small percent of the especially property taxes go to actually pay for it. So I'm looking forward to discussing how we're going to actually do that. Thank you for all your work.
And for myself, you've already identified some of the problems, which is there's more that needs to be done than the resources that we have to do it. And obviously, even just with the manager position that you talked about, obviously there's a process of going through the job description, personnel board review, coming to the city council. So there's a methodology and a process that's already in place that takes some time, and then budgeting, of course, there has to be the resources for that. I do agree, of course, with the involving of the community input. I also think it's important, you've already mentioned this, but I always thought it was, when I worked for the city of San Bruno, was asking the staff, those that are do the job at all levels. Because I think, they see it, they see needs we may not see. They see needs that we do not know of. Those that are in the trucks and in the fields, whether it's mowing them, whether it's picking up the trash on the sidewalks. I think sometimes they have ideas and they have a window into things we don't, and I think sometimes they can offer solutions. But I think also having a budget that is, say, user-friendly is more helpful as well to have the public understand, because what we have to go through is quite in-depth for what the new finance director will be putting together for us. So I look forward to this, and I think it is time that we move forward, but I think it also is time for we know what we're facing. So with that, we want to thank you for your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you.